You don't ignore money advice because you don't care. You ignore it because it all starts sounding the same. Too many rules, too many voices. And somehow, the more you try to understand money, the more uneasy you feel about it. That quiet stress follows you into work, into sleep, into decisions you keep postponing. Here's the uncomfortable part. Most people who skip this conversation don't lose money immediately. They lose clarity, and that cost shows up later when it matters most. This tension sits at the heart of The Index Card by Helaine Olen. Miss this, and you'll keep repeating patterns without knowing why. So, let's begin. Chapter 1. The card that cuts through the noise. Money confusion has a way of feeling personal. Like you missed a class everyone else attended. Like you're behind in a race you don't remember signing up for. You scroll, you read, you listen, and somehow you feel worse, more unsure than when you started. That quiet shame creeps in, the kind that says, I should know this by now. But here's the uncomfortable truth most advice skips over. This confusion isn't a personal failure. It's not about intelligence or discipline or willpower. It's a system designed to overwhelm you. Complexity didn't happen by accident. It pays very well. Everywhere you turn, there's another product, another strategy, another smart move you're supposed to make. Charts, acronyms. Hot takes that change every 6 months. The message is subtle but consistent. If it feels simple, it must be incomplete. If you're calm, you're probably missing out. Funny thing is, that feeling of being perpetually behind, that's profitable. Confused people click more, they trade more, they buy more solutions to problems they didn't have 5 minutes ago. Complexity profits when clarity disappears. There's a moment many people recognize, even if they don't talk about it. You're sitting at your kitchen table late at night. Bills spread out. A half-charged phone. You open one article, then another, then another. Each one contradicts the last. One says you need to optimize everything. Another says you're doomed if you don't start earlier. A third tells you a single mistake will cost you decades. You close the browser and feel tired, not just mentally, emotionally. Like money has turned into this loud, judgmental voice that never quite shuts up. What's rarely said out loud is that most people don't need more information. They need less. Less noise. Less performance. Less pretending this has to be complicated to be respectable. That's where the index card comes in. Not as a gimmick, not as a life hack, but as a quiet rebellion. The idea is almost offensively small. One card, a handful of rules. No secret formulas, no predictions about the future. Just enough structure to keep you steady when everything else is trying to pull you off balance. And that's what simplicity really is here. Not ignorance, not denial, resistance. There's a strange comfort in complicated advice. It gives you an excuse to stay stuck. If the system is too complex, then maybe you're not failing. You're just not ready yet. Simplicity removes that hiding place. It asks less of your brain and more of your honesty. I remember someone once saying they felt disappointed when they first encountered this approach. They expected something more impressive, something that felt worthy of their anxiety. Instead, they got a short list that fit on a card. They laughed at it. Then they ignored it. Then months later, they realized something uncomfortable. Every financial mistake they'd made had violated one of those few lines. Not because the rules were clever, but because they were boring. Boring doesn't sell well. Boring doesn't make you feel special. Boring doesn't let you brag at dinner, but boring works. There's a deeper relief that comes from narrowing your focus. When decisions stop being debates and start being defaults, when you don't need to relitigate every choice because you already decided who you're trying to be. That's what a small framework does. It anchors you, not to perfection, but to consistency. It doesn't promise you'll never mess up. It just makes it harder to drift without noticing. People often confuse simplicity with naivety, as if choosing not to play the game means you don't understand it. But sometimes, the clearest sign that you understand the game is that you stop playing parts of it altogether. You stop chasing the newest advice. You stop assuming someone else knows your life better than you do. You stop believing that your worth depends on how optimized your finances look from the outside. And slowly, almost quietly, money stops feeling like a test you're failing. It becomes a tool again. Imperfect, human, manageable. The index card doesn't solve your life. It doesn't protect you from every mistake or market shift or moment of fear. What it does is give you something solid to return to when everything else gets loud, a place to stand when opinions start flying, a reminder when doubt creeps in, a boundary between what matters and what's just noise. Funny how clarity doesn't shout, it waits, and when you finally hear it, it doesn't ask for much, just your attention, and the courage to believe that simple can still be enough. Chapter 2. Spend less than you earn, the unsexy superpower. Most people think wealth starts with investing, with timing, with picking the right thing before everyone else notices. It sounds exciting that way. Strategic, almost heroic. But that story skips the quiet beginning, the part no one likes to linger on. Wealth actually starts with restraint. That word alone makes people tense. It sounds like punishment, like saying no to yourself while everyone else is saying yes, like living smaller than you could. But restraint, done right, isn't about shrinking your life. It's about creating margin. And margin is where breathing room lives. There's a strange contradiction here. The more you earn, the easier it becomes to spend more than you make. Raises arrive, lifestyles expand, expectations quietly reset. Nothing dramatic happens, no single bad decision, just a slow tightening where every dollar already has a job before it even hits your account. You don't feel reckless, you feel normal. I've seen this play out in tiny moments. Someone gets a bonus and immediately upgrades their phone. Not because the old one is broken, but because the new one feels like a reasonable reward. Another raises their rent just a little, then their car payment, then their subscriptions. Each choice makes sense on its own. Together, they erase the future before it arrives. Saving gets framed as deprivation in these moments, as if putting money aside means you're denying yourself something real today for a vague promise tomorrow. But that framing is backwards. Saving isn't about loss, it's about control. It's buying future freedom in advance. It's giving your future self options instead of obligations. Freedom starts with what you don't spend. There's a quiet power in knowing you don't need every dollar that comes in. It changes how you walk into a meeting, how you respond to pressure, how long you stay in places that no longer fit. Margin does that. It loosens the grip money has on your daily decisions. And it doesn't require brilliance. This is where people get uncomfortable again. They want the advantage to come from intelligence, from cleverness, from being sharper than average. But the truth is less flattering and far more hopeful. Consistency beats intelligence. It beats income. It even beats luck given enough time. There's a story that feels almost too ordinary to matter. Two co-workers, same age, similar jobs. One earns a bit more, spends a bit more, invests sporadically when motivated. The other earns slightly less but saves steadily, without drama, without optimization. Years pass. The second person doesn't look impressive day to day. No big moves, no exciting wins. Then something unexpected happens. A layoff, a health scare, a chance to leave and start over. One person panics, the other pauses. That pause is everything. It's easy to underestimate how powerful it is to not be cornered, to have space between what you earn and what you need. That space absorbs shocks. It buys time, it lets you respond instead of react. Most advice skips this because it's not glamorous. You can't screenshot restraint. You can't show it off. There's no applause for not spending money you could have spent. But there is relief, and relief compounds. What's interesting is how quickly the emotional tone shifts once saving becomes automatic instead of aspirational. At first, it feels tight, then neutral. Then, almost without noticing, it feels reassuring, like locking your door at night. Not exciting, just wise. People often wait for confidence before they start saving. They tell themselves they'll do it once they earn more, once things feel stable, once life calms down. But confidence doesn't come first. Evidence does. And evidence comes from repetition. You save a little, then again, then again. And slowly, the story in your head changes. From, I hope I'll be okay, to, I'm building something, even if it's small. That shift matters more than the numbers. Because once you trust yourself to create margin, you stop chasing every shiny opportunity. You stop mistaking motion for progress. You stop believing that the next clever move will rescue you from habits you haven't addressed. Restraint isn't about being conservative with life. It's about being intentional with energy. Choosing what actually moves you forward instead of what temporarily soothes anxiety. And here's the quiet part no one advertises. Once you have margin, you enjoy spending more, not less. Because it's chosen, because it's grounded, because it doesn't come with a hangover of regret. The unsexy superpower isn't discipline for its own sake. It's the ability to live without constantly borrowing from tomorrow. That's where real wealth begins. Not in the market, not in timing, but in the simple, repeatable decision to leave room for the future to breathe. Chapter 3. Debt, Markets, and the Myth of Cleverness. I'll start with a quiet confession. Most financial mistakes don't feel reckless when we make them. They feel reasonable, responsible even, wrapped in explanations that sound mature when we say them out loud. Debt works that way. It rarely shows up as a villain. It arrives as relief, as permission, as a bridge between who you are and who you're supposed to be by now. A better apartment, a smoother ride, a degree that promises doors will open later. You don't feel like you're borrowing from the future. You feel like you're fixing the present. And that's the trap. Debt sells today at the price of tomorrow. But tomorrow is abstract. Today is loud. There's a moment people recognize only in hindsight. The first payment clears, then the second, then the third. Life moves on, but the obligation stays. Quiet, patient, unemotional. It doesn't care if your priorities change or if the excitement fades. It just waits. What's uncomfortable to admit is that debt often replaces clarity. Instead of asking, can I afford this? The question becomes, can I manage the payment? That single shift lowers the bar dramatically. Almost anything becomes possible when it's broken into monthly pieces. It feels clever, flexible, modern. But flexibility cuts both ways. Because once your future income is already spoken for, your options shrink. Not suddenly, gradually, invisibly. Clever moves feel smart until time intervenes. The same illusion shows up in investing. People want to believe that attention equals advantage, that with enough research, enough insight, enough instinct, they can outmaneuver everyone else. It's flattering to think the outcome depends on how sharp you are. Markets don't reward sharpness the way people expect. They reward patience. And patience doesn't feel like a skill because it doesn't announce itself. There's a particular anxiety that comes from watching others talk confidently about their picks, their timing, their gains. It creates a low hum of doubt, a sense that doing nothing means falling behind. That boring equals irresponsible. So people tinker, they chase, they react, they confuse activity with control. I've seen this play out in small human ways. Someone checks their account daily, riding every swing emotionally. Another jumps strategies every year, always convinced the next one will finally be right. They're not careless. They're engaged. They care deeply. And that's the problem. Ego sneaks in wearing curiosity. The desire to be involved becomes the desire to be right. Losses sting more because they feel personal. Gains feel earned, even when they're random. The irony is that the most reliable approach removes you almost entirely. Broad, diversified, dull. Designed not to impress you, but to outlast you. This feels unsatisfying at first, like showing up to a chess match and being told the winning move is to stop playing. But over time, something shifts. When you stop trying to be clever, you stop blaming yourself for things you can't control. And that's a relief people don't expect. Debt and overcomplicated investing share a common promise. You can outsmart this. You can bend time. You can compress effort. You can skip steps. And sometimes, for a while, it even works. Until it doesn't. Time has a way of exposing strategies that rely on constant vigilance. Life interrupts. Attention drifts. Emotions flare. Plans that required perfection crack under ordinary stress. What lasts are systems that assume you'll be human, that you'll get tired, distracted, uncertain. Systems that don't punish you for not being exceptional every day. There's a strange maturity in choosing approaches that don't need you to be the hero, in accepting that your future doesn't depend on winning every decision, but on not losing to the big, obvious ones. Avoiding bad debt isn't about fear, it's about respect for time, letting tomorrow keep its options, not pre-spending confidence you haven't earned yet. And boring investing isn't about settling. It's about acknowledging that markets don't care how hard you tried. They only care how long you stayed. Once that sinks in, the noise loses its grip. The urge to intervene fades. You stop mistaking motion for mastery. What replaces cleverness isn't ignorance. It's humility. And humility, quietly applied, turns out to be one of the most underrated financial strengths there is. Not flashy, not impressive. Just steady enough to hold when everything else is tempting you to prove something. Chapter 4. Guardrails that let life happen. There's a moment most people don't notice when it happens. Life gets louder, decisions stack up, commitments multiply, and suddenly, the space you thought you had starts shrinking again. Not because you failed, but because complexity has a way of sneaking back in when no one's watching. That's where guardrails matter, not rules shouted at you, not restrictions meant to scare you straight. Guardrails are quieter than that. They exist so you don't have to be perfectly alert at every turn. So a tired version of you doesn't undo the intentions of a clearer one. Insurance is a good example. It's rarely framed honestly. People talk about it like it's pessimism, like expecting something bad to happen. But protection isn't about fear. It's about acknowledging reality without letting it run your life. Accidents don't ask if you were optimistic enough. Illness doesn't care how disciplined you've been. Guardrails don't prevent hardship, but they keep hardship from becoming catastrophe. The same goes for advisors and systems. At their best, they aren't there to impress you. They're there to slow you down, to question impulses, to add friction where emotion wants speed. A good system doesn't tell you what to want. It helps you pause long enough to decide. Big life choices tend to arrive wrapped in urgency. Buy now or miss out. Settle down before it's too late. Upgrade because everyone else is. Pressure loves pretending it's wisdom. And without guardrails, it's easy to mistake tradition for readiness. Readiness is quieter. It doesn't announce itself. It feels more like steadiness than excitement, like the ability to say yes without flinching, or no without apologizing. I once heard someone describe a major purchase as technically affordable but emotionally expensive. That stuck, because money decisions don't live in spreadsheets alone. They live in sleep quality, in stress levels, in how often you feel trapped by choices you already made. Guardrails help align those things. They make sure your finances support your life instead of silently directing it. There's a misconception that financial security is purely personal, that it's about individual discipline and private choices. But stability is quietly collective. It relies on shared systems working well enough that one bad moment doesn't erase years of effort. When those systems weaken, people feel it not as policy, but as anxiety. That's why the simplest rules matter so much. They don't just protect you from bad decisions. They protect you from bad days, from grief, from pressure, from becoming someone you don't recognize just to keep up. Protection creates space for real living. And in that space, something unexpected happens. Money stops being the main character. It becomes background, necessary, present, but no longer demanding constant attention. You think less about optimizing and more about choosing, less about impressing and more about aligning. This doesn't mean life becomes risk-free or perfectly planned. It means when change arrives, as it always does, you're not meeting it empty-handed. There's a calm confidence that grows from knowing your systems can hold you when you're not at your best, when you're distracted, when you're overwhelmed, when you're simply human. That's the quiet promise behind the index card, behind restraint, behind boring investing, behind guardrails. Not control, continuity. A way to keep going without burning yourself out trying to be smarter than life. And maybe that's the real shift. Realizing that financial security isn't about winning. It's about staying in the game long enough for life to actually happen around you. If any part of this felt familiar, if you caught yourself nodding or pausing or thinking of a moment you didn't have words for before, I'd love to hear what stayed with you. What line or idea or feeling followed you a little longer than the rest? And if this kind of quiet, honest conversation around money feels grounding to you, you're welcome to stay. A simple like, lets this reach someone else who might need it tonight. And subscribing just means we keep thinking these things through together, one calm moment at a time.